What happens when a voice that sounds like it lived through decades of heartbreak belongs to someone who's only 20?
All that we went through.
When Amy Winehouse stepped into a recording studio in 2003, producers heard something that shouldn't exist.
She came in the first day and we met, and she played me all the 60s girl group stuff like the Shangri-Las, and then we bonded over Motown and the New Birth and different groups that we both knew. And she said, like, I just want to make a record that sounds like the stuff they play in my local, just like good 60s soulful pop music.
An old soul trapped in a young woman who'd barely started living. She'd become the defining voice of her generation.
Yeah, baby, I love you much.
Win 5 Grammys in a single night.
And the Grammy goes to Amy Winehouse.
And create an album that would reshape modern music. But here's the tragedy nobody saw coming. The very authenticity that made her extraordinary would make survival impossible. This isn't just another story about addiction-destroying talent. This is about a girl who literally sang her way into destruction, whose greatest triumph became her death sentence, and whose voice carried more pain than her body could bear. Amy Jade Winehouse emerged in 2003 with something the music industry hadn't heard in decades. Critics listening to Frank, her debut album, couldn't reconcile what they were hearing with what they were seeing. Here was this 20-year-old from North London channeling Billie Holiday and Sarah Vaughan, her contralto vocals carrying the weight of someone who'd lived 3 lifetimes. The Ivor Novello Songwriting Award she won for Frank should have been validation enough. Most artists would have built on that foundation, refined that sound, stayed in that lane. But Amy dismissed her own debut. "I don't have it in my house," she told an interviewer, explaining that while it wasn't a dreadful record, it just wasn't her. The album went platinum in the UK. Reviewers praised her distinctive vocals and mature songwriting, yet Amy was already chasing something darker. On some editions of Frank, a hidden final track called Mr. Magic gave the first hint of what was coming. An ode to cannabis, it suggested that even at 20, Amy was already letting substances creep into the same space as her escape and creativity. The jazz influence came honestly through her bloodline. Her father, Mitch, sang Sinatra around their North London house. Her uncles were jazz musicians. Most significantly, her grandmother, Cynthia, had been a singer who once dated jazz legend Ronnie Scott. Cynthia shared more than music with Amy. She introduced her granddaughter to tarot and mysticism, becoming the kindred spirit Amy would later tattoo onto her arm. This wasn't just musical heritage. It was emotional DNA, a predisposition toward intensity that would manifest in Amy's work and life. By 2005, Amy had carved out her identity in a way that set her apart from every other young artist trying to make it. She wasn't interested in the polished pop machine or the carefully managed personas of her peers. When she performed in Camden's late-night venues, hopping on the bar after hours to sing for small crowds, she was already displaying the contradiction that would define her, desperate to share her music, allergic to the spotlight that music would bring. While Amy's voice was making her famous, bulimia was quietly destroying her. The disorder had started at 17, a secret shared with a small group of friends. They would binge together, then purge. For most of them, it stopped. For Amy, it became a fixture. Bulimia doesn't announce itself the way other addictions do. There are no crack pipes, no slurred performances, no tabloid videos. It works internally, eroding the body's systems over time, weakening the heart, damaging organs, stripping the body of essential nutrients. Amy's frame was small to begin with. Over the next decade, the eating disorder hollowed her out, making her increasingly fragile. But in the early 2000s, no one was paying attention to it. Amy's weight fluctuated, but she was young, talented, and on the rise. The eating disorder stayed in the background, a quiet saboteur that would amplify every crisis to come. Blake Fielder Civil entered Amy's life in 2003, and by 2005, their relationship had become all-consuming. He was charming in the way troubled men often are, magnetic, unpredictable, dangerous. Friends described him as a charismatic addict, someone who pulled Amy into a world she hadn't fully entered before. Amy had smoked marijuana since her teens, but she'd mocked people who used harder substances. She thought they were foolish. Blake changed that. He introduced her to substances like crack and hard drugs, things she'd once laughed at others for using. Her first manager, Nick Godwin, noticed the shift immediately. "Amy changed overnight after she met Blake," he said. Her personality grew more distant. The substances she'd once ridiculed became part of her routine. Their relationship was volatile from the start. They got matching tattoos of each other's names. Their arguments could spiral quickly, and they bonded over late nights in Camden's underground scene. Friends observed that Amy seemed to thrive creatively in the chaos, even as it destroyed her personally. She bought a flat in Camden, a neighborhood known for its punk history, dive bars, and easy access to everything she shouldn't have been near. Her drink of choice became the Rick Stacy, a powerful cocktail mixing 3 types of spirits. Blake and Amy fed off each other's excesses. Their connection was described as addictive in itself, 2 people spiraling together, unable to pull away. At one point in 2006, Blake left Amy for a former girlfriend. The breakup devastated her. Amy's response was to write. She poured her heartbreak, rage, and despair into an album that would become Back to Black. She half-joked in an interview that she needed some headaches going to write about, acknowledging that turmoil fueled her creativity. The songs that emerged, Back to Black, Love is a Losing Game, Tears Dry on Their Own, were directly inspired by the cycle of love and ruin she'd experienced with Blake. The album was a masterpiece. Produced by Mark Ronson and the Dap Kings, it updated 1960s soul and girl group pop with an edge that felt both vintage and urgent. The lyrics were brutal, full of self-loathing, hopelessness, and raw honesty about addiction. Yet the melodies were irresistible. Critics called it one of the most important albums of the 21st century. It sold millions worldwide. But the process locked Amy into a dangerous belief. Great art required great suffering. If pain produced Back to Black, what would sobriety produce? The question would haunt her for the rest of her life. In late 2005, Amy's first manager saw the warning signs. Her drinking was escalating. He feared she was inching closer to the edge, at risk of squandering her talent. He urged her to get help. Amy refused. She swore to her father, Mitch, that she didn't need treatment. Mitch sided with her. That refusal became the foundation for Rehab, the song that would define her career. "They tried to make me go to rehab. I said no, no, no," she sang, turning the real-life confrontation into a defiant anthem. The dark humor in the lyrics, "I ain't got the time, and if my daddy thinks I'm fine," resonated with millions. It became her signature song, but the song was more than irony. It was prophecy. By the time Back to Black was released in late 2006, Amy was already in trouble. When the album launched in the United States in March 2007, she was, by most accounts, fully in the grip of addiction. The album's success was staggering. It debuted high on the Billboard charts, marking one of the strongest American debuts by a UK female artist at the time. At the 2008 Grammy Awards, Amy won 5 trophies, including Record of the Year and Song of the Year for Rehab, and Best New Artist. She tied the record for the most Grammys won by a female artist in a single night. She watched the ceremony via satellite from London. Visa troubles kept her from attending in person due to prior arrests. When the awards were announced, she looked genuinely stunned. In one acceptance speech, she thanked "My Blake incarcerated," a reference to Fielder Seville, who was in jail at the time on charges related to a bar fight and attempting to pervert justice. The moment captured the paradox of Amy's life in early 2008. At her professional peak, winning the highest honors in music, her personal life was in ruins. She was tethered to a man behind bars and an addiction that was tightening its hold. The window for early intervention, the moment in 2005 when she could have gone to treatment before things spiraled, had closed. Amy Winehouse was, by all accounts, the most anti-fame person you could meet. She loved making music. She loved pulling pints at the local Camden pub. She did not love red carpets or photo shoots or the relentless attention that came with being a global star. In the early days, before Back to Black made her a household name, she was known in her Camden neighborhood as a good-time girl with a big mouth and an attitude. She'd hop on the bar after hours and sing for a small, entranced crowd. She could walk down the street without a problem. Sudden superstardom shattered that. By the peak of her fame, Amy couldn't leave her flat without paparazzi swarming. She became increasingly alienated from her own world, flanked by bodyguards instead of friends. The loss of normalcy weighed on her. She once confessed, while watching an old performance of hers, that she would give it all back just to walk down the street with no hassle. The media feeding frenzy was relentless. In mid-2007, during a U.S. promotional tour, Amy gave interviews while clearly unwell. She struggled through moments on camera, losing her place and appearing exhausted during key appearances. Shows were canceled under vague explanations of exhaustion, which the public rightly interpreted as signs of serious trouble. In August 2007, she was hospitalized for what was widely reported as a serious health scare. A few months later, the tabloid The Sun published a video allegedly showing Amy using hard substances at a house party. The footage showed her in a deeply incoherent state. The public outcry was immediate. Within days, Amy entered treatment for the first time, just weeks before the Grammy Awards. She checked out early to perform via satellite for the ceremony, a performance that, against all odds, went well. She delivered strong renditions of her songs and wept when she won. It was a brief, triumphant reprieve. But as soon as the Grammys were over, the chaos resumed. Between 2008 and 2009, Amy had multiple run-ins with the law. She was arrested for assault after punching a fan who approached her for an autograph. She allegedly attacked a theater manager during a pantomime performance when the audience booed her for shouting at cast members. The British press, which had initially celebrated her, increasingly portrayed her as a tragic figure, using the cruel nickname Wino. Paparazzi stalked her constantly. In early 2009, burglars targeted her Camden home, taking advantage of the fact that if photographers weren't outside, she likely wasn't there. Amy sought a high court injunction. In May 2009, a judge banned photographers from approaching within 100 meters of her residence. A source from her management explained that the constant harassment had made her life unsafe. Every time she got in her car, she was chased or jostled. It had occasionally turned into mayhem. The injunction provided some relief, but it couldn't protect her everywhere. The media didn't create her addiction, but the fishbowl environment made recovery almost impossible. Privacy and normalcy, two things essential for healing. In the summer of 2008, after a string of heavy binges, Amy collapsed at home and was taken to the hospital. Her father later said doctors warned she was showing early signs of emphysema. She was 24 years old. The lung damage was believed to be linked to years of chain smoking and substance use. Physicians told her that if she didn't stop, she risked permanent harm to her voice and could even end up needing an oxygen mask to breathe. The message was sobering, and for a moment it seemed to land. According to her family, that scare pushed Amy to give up certain substances after 2008, even though other struggles remained. Mitch later said she had stayed away from the hardest drugs in those final years, but letting go of one dependency didn't mean she was safe. But she didn't stop drinking. Alcohol became her constant companion, the substance that filled the void left by everything else. Friends would later admit that while people focused on the hard partying, the biggest problem was Amy's alcoholism. It had the worst effect on her small frame. Her body, already weakened by a decade of bulimia, couldn't process the volume she was consuming. There were attempts at recovery during this period. After her health scare, Amy spent long stretches in St. Lucia, hoping the slower pace would help her reset and focus on new music. Locals remembered seeing her on the beach or horseback riding, and she managed to write a few songs while she was there. But she also continued to drink, and any progress she made remained fragile. Her marriage to Blake Fielder Civil was falling apart. After his release from prison, he entered treatment himself, but their reunions were short-lived and volatile, with arguments and incidents that made headlines. Not long after, Blake filed for divorce while still in recovery, citing Amy's infidelity while he was incarcerated. and by the middle of 2009, the marriage had officially ended. Amy struggled to find stability afterward. She cycled between brief periods of sobriety and painful setbacks, and her family made public pleas for her to seek help, a sign of how worried they had become. Despite the turmoil, there were moments of hope. She began dating film director Reg Travis, who was widely seen as a grounding presence in her life, and she talked about returning to music. In 2011, she recorded a duet with Tony Bennett, one of her lifelong idols, and the session was praised by everyone involved. Early that same year, at her family's urging, Amy entered treatment again. She spent several weeks in a structured program, and when she returned home in May, those around her noticed a change. Mitch Winehouse said she seemed happier than she had been in years. She had managed a stretch of sobriety, and her closest friends felt she was finally gaining control. She had put on a little healthy weight, was talking excitedly about new songs, and even discussed the possibility of a future with Reg Travis. Amy had gained a bit of healthy weight. She was excited about the future, making plans for new songs and even discussing marriage with Reg Travis. The fragile progress didn't last. In June 2011, Amy decided to launch a short European summer tour. The decision in hindsight was disastrous. On June 18th in Belgrade, Serbia, Amy Winehouse stumbled on stage for what would be her final public performance. The show was a catastrophe. She arrived about an hour late and appeared extremely intoxicated. Thousands of fans watched in shock as Amy slurred incoherent lyrics, stopping mid-song at times and wandering off stage. Eventually, the crowd booed her off. Footage of the concert spread across the internet, a heartbreaking visual of how far she had fallen. Amy's team immediately canceled the remainder of the tour. They released a statement saying she would be given as long as it takes to sort herself out. Privately, her managers and label were alarmed. They thought she had been on the mend. The relapse was severe. A source close to her management said everyone was absolutely stunned. The hotel had been told to remove all traces of alcohol, but if an addict wants to get hold of something, they will. The people around Amy insisted they had done everything they could to support her. The pressures of the industry and Amy's own impulsive decision to tour before she was ready had created a perfect storm. The Belgrade show was a loud warning. After returning to London, Amy made no more public appearances. She stayed in her Camden townhouse, resting and laying low. Just over a month later, on July 23, 2011, Amy's bodyguard found her unresponsive in bed. She was soon pronounced dead. Amy Winehouse was 27 years old. The news hit the world like a punch.
Amy Winehouse has been found dead at her North London home.
Gifted singer Amy Winehouse found dead in her London home. She was just 27.
And on her final journey, Amy was still being followed by the cameras.
An initial autopsy was inconclusive, but a coroner's inquest later confirmed the cause of death as accidental alcohol poisoning. The verdict was recorded as death by misadventure. Her blood alcohol level was dangerously high, far beyond what her body could cope with after a period of abstinence. Signs in the room suggested she had relapsed in the hours before she was found. Her doctor, who had seen her the night before, said Amy had been drinking but did not seem severely impaired. Amy had talked about plans in the future. She didn't want to die. She was looking forward to what came next. The physician testified that the sudden return to heavy drinking after time away from it had overwhelmed her already fragile system. In their statement after the inquest, Amy's parents said it was some relief to finally understand what had happened. They noted that Amy had been fighting hard to overcome her dependence and that it was a source of deep pain that she could not win in time. News of Amy's death spread rapidly. Outside her Camden home, grief-stricken fans gathered to create a makeshift shrine. They left flowers, handwritten notes, bottles, cigarettes, and photos. Some fans openly wept. Others stood quietly, as if not fully comprehending the reality. One 18-year-old fan told a reporter, "We saw her deterioration every day, in every picture. It was like we were on a journey with her. So many people just wanted her to get better." The sentiment was widely echoed. Amy's struggles had played out so publicly that the world felt invested in her, for better or worse. A few days later, on July 26th, Amy's family and close friends said goodbye in a private funeral in North London. In his eulogy, Mitch Winehouse celebrated his daughter's loving nature, telling stories that had the mourners laughing through tears. Amy was about one thing, and that was love, Mitch said to the crowd outside the service. He thanked the fans for their support and reminded everyone that behind the legend was a warm-hearted, generous girl who loved her family and friends deeply. Amy's death also reignited discussions about the way society treats troubled celebrities. One of her friends said, "Yes, she did this to herself. Yes, she was self-destructive, but she was also a victim. We all have to take a bit of responsibility. Us, the public, the paparazzi. She was a star, but she was also just a girl." The media's role in her downfall couldn't be ignored. The British press had relentlessly hounded her at her lowest points, often ridiculing or belittling her struggles as entertainment. Amy herself had secured a court order to stop photographers from harassing her, but even that couldn't shield her whenever she stepped out in public. She became a cautionary tale about the toll of tabloid intrusion and the lack of privacy given to those struggling with mental health and addiction in the public eye. But perhaps the most haunting revelation came from her brother, Alex. He made a claim that reframed the entire tragedy. Bulimia was what really killed her. The eating disorder that began at 17 had quietly destroyed Amy's body over more than a decade. It weakened her heart, her organs, her resilience. It made her susceptible to the effects of substances and alcohol in ways that a healthier body might have withstood. While the world focused on the videos, the arrests, the tabloid headlines, bulimia was working in silence. It was the wound no one was watching, the crisis that didn't make the front page. By the time Amy died, her body had no margin for error left. One binge, after a period of abstinence, was enough. Amy Winehouse's life was painfully short, but her impact has been enormous. Back to Black has sold over 16 million copies worldwide and is frequently lauded as a modern classic. In 2025, the album was selected by the U.S. Library of Congress for the National Recording Registry, recognizing it as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Her influence can be heard in countless younger singers who cite her as the inspiration for bringing raw emotional honesty back to the radio. To honor her memory, Amy's family established the Amy Winehouse Foundation, which works to prevent substance abuse in young people and to support those in recovery. One of its initiatives, Amy's Place, is a recovery home for women overcoming addiction, a hopeful legacy born from tragedy. Her parents and friends have also written memoirs to show the world the real Amy, beyond the tabloid caricature. "We always wanted the world to know the real Amy, where she came from and what made her tick," Mitch Winehouse said in an interview. Those who knew her reminisce about her goofy sense of humor, her deep love of 1960s girl groups and jazz records, and her habit of calling friends in the middle of the night just to chat. Amy Winehouse joined the infamous 27 Club, that eerie roster of musical icons like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, and Kurt Cobain, who also died at 27. But even among those legends, Amy's story stands out for its modern immediacy and the way we all watched it unfold in real time. Amy Winehouse's story isn't just about substances or fame or toxic relationships. It's about overlapping vulnerabilities that compounded over time until there was no margin left. The eating disorder that started at 17, the refusal of early help in 2005, the media scrutiny that stripped away privacy, the belief that pain was the price of genius, each crisis made the next one harder to survive. She was a young woman with a once-in-a-generation voice who couldn't separate her brilliance from the suffering that fueled it. She didn't want to die. She talked about the future the night before she was found. But the accumulated damage, bulimia, substances, alcohol, isolation, left her body with nothing to fall back on. The world lost a rare talent who burned too bright, too fast. What remains is the music, the foundation that bears her name, and the uncomfortable question her life forces us to ask. How much responsibility do we bear when we watch someone unravel and do nothing but watch?